here we have the widow and the rich people putting money in the offering, and it's hard not to see that this has something to do with our own offerings. If you've been in church for a long period of time, you've probably heard someone talk about tithing. Has anyone heard that before, tithing? Or is that just new? A couple people? Has anyone been told specifically by a pastor, you should tithe? No? That's probably a good thing. In a lot of Christian circles, they have this idea that we should tithe. And this is something that comes from the Old Testament. The Old Testament has multiple tithes, not just one. There's a tithe for the temple, there's a tithe to the priest, there's a tithe to the king, there's a tithe every 3 years for the poor and widows and foreigners. The word tithe literally means tenth. It means giving 10% to the cause of God or whatever it's going to. And so if someone tells me, oh, I tithe, I am assuming, rather than what they mean or not, I'm assuming it means they give 10% of their income to the church. And that's a good goal. That comes from the Bible. The word tithe comes from the Bible, and it's a good goal to try to give 10% of what you have. But I don't think that that's reasonable for everyone. For some people, giving 10% can be utterly problematic, and for others, it's nowhere near enough. Take, if you will, a single mom who works part-time during the day and spends her evenings and nights taking care of her kids. She makes $25,000, $30,000 a year. Her giving 10% might mean she doesn't eat for a week. Or it might mean she can't pay her electricity bill. For her, giving 10% might reasonably be too much. But take a Christian that makes $200,000 a year. If they give 10%, $20,000, they still have $180,000 to live on. That's almost 3 times the average American household income. They could probably afford to give a lot more. I don't think the goal for New Testament Christians is tithing or 10%. I think the goal is that we practice sacrificial generosity. Here's what I mean. You should give enough money to the church and the work of the kingdom that it actually costs you something. Rather be giving to the offering or to the work of missions or whatever, the total money you give should cause you to give up something. It shouldn't cause you to give up everything. It will look different for different people. I'm not saying you need to not pay your bills and just give money to the church. That's not at all what's happening. But if you can go out and eat every day of the week, and go out and get a fancy coffee every morning, and if you have a few subscriptions that you pay for that you barely even use, you can probably afford to give some more money to the things of God. But if you're struggling to slip by, and you're giving generously, but you are unable to feed yourself or pay your bills, you're probably giving too much. A few years back, I was talking to a pastor friend of a little church in Mississippi, and he talked about how he had this little elderly widow who just lost her husband, and she was trying to figure out how to live on her own. And she had always been told, you need to give 10% to the church. You need to tithe. And so she did that faithfully. And almost every month, she would have to ask the deacons for help with their bills. Eventually, the deacons realized what was happening. They sat down with the elders and had a conversation. They figured out that this lady was giving about $400 a month, and she always needed about $200 to cover her bills. And the pastor sat down with her and said, "Ma'am, you're fine to just give $200. You're not sinning because you didn't give 10%. And for her, that released her from this extra burden. She gave what she could. She still gave. But she wasn't doing it at a cost of herself. Here's the thing. If the amount of money you give to the church hinders you or causes the church to need to support you, you're probably giving too much. But if the amount of money you're giving the church doesn't cause you to give up anything, if you can pretty much have whatever you want and do whatever you want, you're probably not giving enough. I think the principle here in our passage is sacrificial generosity. These rich people were able to come and give large sums out of their excess. But Jesus doesn't want that. He wants the little old lady who gives 2 mites because that's all she can afford. But it's out of her living. You see, I think Jesus expects our giving to come out of our living, not our excess.